GM world, and welcome back to another episode of the Immutable Mindset. This is Kevin, and I am beyond excited to introduce, if I could say it, today's guest. He's a mastermind in marketing and entrepreneurship, and he's built an incredible career transforming businesses across multiple industries. Welcome to the award-winning marketer, entrepreneur, and trailblazer, Chris Ghent. In 2005, Chris burst onto the scene, launching an e-commerce automotive retail startup that would be the first step in his incredible journey. As a strategist at heart, Chris specializes in digital-led, technology-powered, and data-driven marketing and communication initiatives. His primary mission is to deliver innovative business strategies and marketing approaches that revolutionize how companies navigate the modern world, and that's exactly what he's done. Now, Chris is pushing the boundaries of technology, most recently working with Near Foundation as their global head of brand and partnerships to advance human-centric and blockchain-based projects, and also, most recently, as an advisor to Mintbase. Throughout his career, Chris has worked with clients like Answer ALS, Infinity Motor Company, Johnson & Johnson, Keds, and Nielsen, and he's won 3 Clios for his work with Answer ALS, a health-focused nonprofit startup in collaboration with Microsoft and the NFL. If you'd ask him, he'd say his greatest strength lies in his ability to digest, identify, and deliver innovative solutions to business challenges. Buckle up, folks, because we're about to dive deep into the mind of a marketing genius and uncover the secrets behind his phenomenal success. Welcome to the Immutable Mindset, Chris.
Great to be here, Kevin. And it's funny, it's been a while since we've chatted, so it's good to be back on and talking through things. I haven't been more inspired than some of the chats that you've had and the ones we've had. So looking forward to dig into some Web3 focused things today.
It's kind of nice to have Kevin doing your own, right? We should kind of follow you.
It's good. When I think about my own career, hearing someone else talk about it, I often don't appreciate it, but hearing, some of the accomplishments in places I've worked and people I've worked with, it's been pretty awesome.
As a recruiter, I have seen that unfortunately most people are just not the greatest at saying what's fantastic and super amazing about them. So no worries, I got you. But yes, it has been a little bit. The last time and where we met was actually at ETH Denver, which was a really awesome conference. But to that point, I went to Consensus and I met with the folks back at Near, which is where I met Chris over by the Near area. And again, nothing but great conversations, which is all about Web3, right? That's what we're here talking about. That's the industry we inhabit. I'd love to get our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So I'd love to start back, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you first got involved with Web3 technologies? Like, what's the story there?
Yeah, I'll go back super far. I think it plays into a lot of folks that are in this space. My original career plan and path was to be a dentist of all things. And funny enough, the whole point there was actually about getting into a medical profession where you could actually run your own business. And so that kind of itch actually came after me. And in 2005 through 2011, I actually launched the e-commerce platform way back when, selling high-performance auto parts for cars. And we grew that actually through the heyday of eBay and PayPal acquisitions and all of that. So it actually participated in kind of the earliest wave of, I guess what we'd call today, Web 2.
Yeah, Web 2, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I moved to New York. I kind of got sucked into marketing and advertising industry because a lot of what I was actually doing, I gave up the path of becoming a dentist because I realized I didn't have to, work in people's mouths like a mechanic. It's my own hobby is cars. But I didn't have to do that in order to actually launch a business and build a business. And all the things that we did with the e-commerce store are what we would call today like community management, business development, a lot of marketing, being in forums, and a lot of the stuff you're kind of seeing the same behaviors in Discord and Reddit and Telegram. And so I moved to New York in 2010, ended up in my first agency job in 2011, 2012. And really just started getting into product design, UX, UI, and launching websites way back when and doing product development for Fortune 50s, Fortune 500s. Call it, 2012, 2013, a very good friend of mine and coworker used to pitch us Bitcoin after every meeting. His name is John Crane. You'll know him today as the co-founder and CEO of SuperRare.
Yes.
And so his brother and his cousin, when they were building it, I always listened, but I used to say to him, John, we live in New York. I live in a shoebox apartment. I got student debt. I'm eating ramen noodles. I can't buy this fake money. And then I realized that as a technologist, it wasn't about the financial aspect. It was about what the technology could actually do.
Right.
He ended up moving on I'm working on a spin out from Consensus called Block Apps, early days of Ethereum, and then launched Super Rare. And funny enough, 2016, 2017, we're talking about his journey, and I'm realizing, all the stuff we're doing in Web2 for these clients, whether it's an automotive brand or a consumer packaged goods company, they're all going to be impacted by this technology. And I couldn't find enough information out in the world to really dive in and wrap my head around it. So call it 2018, took a bit of a leap of faith, and actually went to go join a former CMO of mine from an old agency called KBS at a company called Singular DTV. So Singular DTV was actually a spin out from Consensus, one of the earliest smart contract use cases on Ethereum, focused on rights, royalty, revenue waterfalls within the back end of Hollywood. So think podcasts, think music, think movies. And a lot of the things that they were thinking about are what we would talk today about being DAOs. It was talking about fundraising. It was talking about rights, royalty, and revenue management. And when you think about what NFTs are doing today, they were a little bit ahead of their time. Timing is everything. So I left the traditional career path and jumped in because I just wanted to learn. I wanted to get my hands on the tech and really see what was possible. And so funny enough, within that job, I met a ton of people on the Consensus side and Consensus Mesh, met a ton of people at Brave and Brave Browser, obviously a little bit of a shout out to Brave. But, I think going back to the point there, it really was about taking a bold move and jumping in to understand what was going on.
So it sounds like it was kind of the less the financial side and you kind of being a technologist. It was the technology. Did you find yourself getting involved in any of the crazes, whether that was the ICO craze or the NFT craze? Did any of that capture your attention? Was that an onboard for you?
It's funny. It wasn't an initial onboard for me. The biggest onboard for me was starting to play with purchase of films and music within what we ended up rebranding to be called Breaker. Singular DTV actually owned, if you guys remember Breaker Magazine, they owned Breaker Magazine. We actually created Breaker Studios and ultimately the Breaker DApp. So one of the earliest decentralized applications was actually an iOS app. Again, these guys were pretty early, call it back in 2018 to 2020, getting products to market. But when you started to actually look, the tech, the fiat onboarding, the credit card solutions weren't really there. And if you look at where we are today, there's been a ton of advancement. But my first jump in was actually these practical things, things that we're doing every day. And I think you'll hear me talk a lot about how do we tap into pre-existing behaviors to onboard people into Web3. So I fall into the same category. Where can the technology meet me?
I don't want to pivot too hard, but only because it's kind of in the air right now, right? Only because we were talking about those days, the meme coin craze that's kind of going on right now. I just want to capture your thoughts really fast on just your thoughts on. I think you're probably more of a purist than most people that get into the gen side of things, right? So how do you feel about meme coins onboarding, that narrative being easy for people to attach to and understand? How do you feel about that as more of a purist in this space?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's positives and negatives. I think the positive is it sparks some people's interest. I think the negative is it tends to push more of the narrative around financial outcomes. And I think when you think about really what is the immutable nature, right? We're on the Immutable podcast after all.
That's right.
The immutable nature of what NFTs can provide from an ownership perspective. Great, owning that coin, it is immutable that it's in your wallet and all that stuff. But what does it actually do for you? What's the utility? So the danger trap for me is actually if there's no true utility baked into these things and the community is just looking for financial outcomes, is the team that's actually running the thing or the community behind it actually have shared incentives and do they have shared values? And so for me, I don't have an issue with it. I think the biggest thing is what's the purpose and are we giving people enough, just like me in 2018, are we giving people enough information to be able to actually know what they're getting involved with? And so that'd be the kind of more negative side of if we're not providing that level of education, I think some of these things can be a little bit dangerous.
That's the only kind of the crux to me, right? Is I always end there. I get involved, I am a degen, so I do get involved, but it always goes back to that part here. Are we doing more harm than good? And at the end of the day, I think about like Axie Infinity, right? And at a certain point, it stops becoming fun and it becomes a job because
Hmm.
it's financialized and you're only playing it to earn something. You're only involved in this meme to earn something, to sell it for somebody else for bigger bags. And so exactly, utility is lost. One of the things that I know I definitely wanted to touch on you and kind of segue this is we're talking about onboarding. So sports, media, and entertainment, and all the really freaking cool things that are starting to pop up. Me and Adam, before we got on, we're just talking about, I mean, heck, Amazon's about to launch an NFT marketplace in a
It's the
week, and it feels
quietest
like we're
launch
not
ever.
talking.
No one's even
Feels
talking
like
about.
that's like
Why
a,
is it the
a
biggest
big,
Yeah.
headline?
a big freaking deal. So yeah, kind of pivoting this a little bit to kind of the sports media and marketing entertainment side, where I think the onboarding with utility is going to happen. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, sports media and entertainment is what's going to onboard the masses, without a doubt. I've been saying that for years. It's where I first jumped into the space full time. And again, it really comes back to where meet people where they are. People are already consuming those areas. People are already collecting things in those areas. People are already looking for ways to get closer to their favorite athletes or their favorite stars. And so when you think about something like Amazon coming in, I think the big question marks actually become around, custodial, non-custodial. Can you actually move the things out of their marketplace or not? And you go, is it a true purist use of the technology, or is it riding the wave and trying to capitalize from a financial perspective? Now, there's tons of debate there. I don't think we should spend too much time on that. But I think when you do really start to look, it's a big kind of checkbox for the industry to say the technology is starting to become validated.
Yep.
It's starting to be said. The world is now hearing the technology is not going away. And I think that that's the most important thing. How it's going to be used, is it going to be used in its best capacity and to its full capacity? Debatable. But I think the best part is you've got major players coming in and going, hey, we can actually onboard the next billion. Now, the question is which chain, how, what's the benefit?
And
Really, that's the biggest
and
question.
my take on this one, I think the mass majority of people don't really need to know or care how the sausage is made, right? Like think about any technological advancement over the last, 50, we'll call it 40, 50 years. We just do it. We're just using the technology as consumers. It's part of our everyday life. We don't need to know about L1s, L2s. We don't need to understand everything. Once that wallet is integrated and the safety features are there and all those anti-fraud. I mean, that's my concern with Amazon, right? I was joking around like, what? So now I could use Amazon gift cards to buy NFTs, and we kind of laugh about it. Is yes, we can, and that's a good thing, but we also have to ensure that the security and the infrastructure is there to do it right, to avoid more fraudulent and negative PR. That's my hot take.
Yeah. And honestly, if you think about Amazon, right, they're not just selling books anymore, right? They're selling pretty much anything and everything on demand, even into healthcare. You start to
Right.
look at how they're playing in the healthcare system. You go, well, actually, if you could start to get health incentives and you could start to get digital identity and all of that stuff coming on chain, now you talk about a pretty major deal.
Correct. I mean, healthcare, in my opinion, healthcare and real estate transactions, all those transactions moving into the blockchain to be fully immutable. I mean, that's the biggest one. I mean, think about the nature of where the state of our current healthcare administration functionality is right now, and what a massive opportunity that is.
And look at the state of the financial infrastructure today, right? I'm a big, sadly, First Republic Bank fan,
Yikes.
and they obviously just went under. But I think about my own student debt, the other mortgages and things that we're able to get
Yep.
amazing like prices in, and you start to go, well, actually, securitizing this stuff on chain can make a lot of sense because the bank does go under and they need to move all their assets. Might actually be cheaper in the long run to do that over to Chase.
Not to like
Yeah.
harp on this, but that was like the original interoperability right there. I spent 4 years working in the medical industry, and the how difficult it is for one medical system to talk to another medical
yeah.
system is literally where we're at with one blockchain being able to talk to another blockchain. And in the medical industry, we would create these wormholes so that we could pass information along. But sometimes those wormholes, it sounds real familiar, right? It feels like we've done this before, and it didn't work before.
But I was going to say it sounds pretty epic, right?
It sounds pretty
That
epic.
most of these places use.
Pun intended, guys.
And you
Pun
think
intended.
about, listen, I'm a dad. I got them all
I
day.
love
But
it.
you also said One Medical, right? And so that's Amazon's big play in this space. You start to think about how One Medical,
Yep.
PillPack, and all these other
PillPack.
moves are coming in. You're starting to talk about food safety. You're talking about drug safety. Being able to have drugs and prescriptions done as NFTs could actually become a major deal from a safety perspective. I think this is the part where education in DC actually matters a ton. Now, granted, the regulatory landscape's a hot mess. I think we should probably avoid most of that chat. But I think at the end of the day, when you think about real use cases
Yeah.
where people could get real benefits, the technology actually has the opportunity to do that. And also think about the opioid crisis, right?
Hmm.
If you actually know how many pills have gone to somebody, and somebody might be able to track or burn their NFT of their pills at any given time, you probably actually see where these things are on the open market. And so you're potentially are actually going to cut back on loss. You're going to cut back on abuse. You're going to be able to have doctors have information in real time. That's a real use case. Now, you could say, couldn't you do that with today's technology? Sure. But also, you could
Lack of
actually
enforcement.
start to look and go, yeah, and what if those databases go down, or what if Epic were to go out of business? So from my perspective, it's really how are we creating infrastructure for the future, and kind of trying to move on from not just the degen side. I think some of that stuff can be fun, right? Gaming,
Yeah.
for example, is fun. There's always degen behavior in gaming. But when you think about the ability for people to come in and truly leverage this tech to do something different and make their lives better,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the coolest parts here.
No, I think you nailed it on the head. And it's something I talk about all the time. And it's meeting people where they're at. And I've been talking about this a lot lately because, we get into these esoteric conversations within this technology, and sometimes people aren't involved. And it's, we get into these very grandiose, we're going to onboard the next billion. And I keep talking about it, right? It's like onboard the next one, onboard the next one. But that gets to blockchains talking to particular audiences and not to everybody. Because if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. So to branding,
Correct.
right? Where we use these words like L1, L2, consensus algorithms, all these things that I feel like don't allow people to participate. We have a lack of public understanding. There's tons of misconceptions and skepticism around blockchains. Of course, you just mentioned the regulatory uncertainty. Building a cohesive brand and identity. How do these blockchains? How do they solve the branding issue? How do they actually speak to an audience and speak plainly enough that they can meet them where they're at?
Well, look, I'll say part of what's kept me in this space is actually the number of branding and marketing challenges in this space are some of the most interesting, but they're not new problems. And I think that's something that we really have to say out loud is most of the challenges we have with branding in this space and in this industry are not unique. And anyone that wants to tell you different, I'm happy to have a chat. DM me on Twitter. We can go down that rabbit hole. But the reality is today, there has not been one layer one that has actually branded itself, or that a community has branded it in a way that you can recognize it as a Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or even Diners Club, or I think of my grandmother,
Yep.
Discover.
Yeah.
And so when you start to think, right, if you can normalize these things and you talk about them like infrastructure and like credit cards, most people just swipe a credit card, they move on, they have no
Think
idea how the
don't
system
think
underneath of
that's
it
right.
works. And so when you start to actually go, okay, from a branding and identity perspective, it's how do you get people to understand that your product is trustworthy and that your community is trustworthy and that the technology is trustworthy. And while I love things like Saturday Night Live having put NFTs in front of millions and millions of people, the perception that it set was actually a big problem. And so most people know non-fungible token as now this kind of meme
PFP.
coin or
Yeah.
a collectible images, a PFP, a JPEG. It's useless, it's worthless. But I also go back and go, well, it's great. Now we have an education opportunity. Now you have an SEO opportunity. And so for a lot of these layer ones, building the brand, I'll say there hasn't been one that's won yet. There hasn't been one that's done this right yet.
Agreed.
Uh, I've worked with Tezos. I built one of the marketing orgs here in New York City. I've worked with the Near Foundation on the Near brand. And they've done a lot of phenomenal work, but none of them have truly operated like a brand. None of the communities operate from a branding capacity. And when you think about how does an identity work, plus what does it make you feel? Like a logo is not a brand. It's a small
Right.
piece of it. It's probably the most important piece of it, but there has not been one that's actually broken through. Now, you look at all the dollars and cents spent on partnerships and things like F1 that we saw the last couple of years, tons of exchanges. You saw Tezos on McLaren and the Red Bull
Crypto.com is a
Racing
key
Oracle
sponsor
card.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, crypto.com. You think about all the folks that we probably don't want to talk about in the FTX spending money there too.
Yeah.
And you go, at the end of the day, there was a ton of money spent on branding. What did they do?
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, a lot of what has to be done is development of use cases. It's a lot of what I spent my time on with the Near Foundation. And you'll see things like SailGP, which most people go, well, why SailGP? And you actually go, well, look at the folks associated with it. You've got Larry Ellison as
Hey,
the
David Palmer.
primary owner. Yeah. David Palmer, who is one of the best from Bernoulli Locke, working on launching the DAO.
Super
And
smart.
so they're actually selling a commercial sports team as a DAO for the first time ever. You think Link's DAO, it's been a long time going. These guys are raising money to sell a commercial asset. And it's not about getting people that love sailboat racing in. It's about getting people that understand how commercial viability of sports media and entertainment actually are going to play. So they're trailblazing right now with SailGP because at the end of the day, the DAO infrastructure on Near is actually pretty great. And so the ability for people to actually come together, make these decisions, whether you're like super fan or you want to be an owner, the reality is for the first time in history, you'll actually be able to participate in that. And so
Oh, that's
when I
powerful.
think about where are things going, we also said, hey, there's an opportunity to do commercial team sale. There's an opportunity to have Oracle building technology with and on top of Near. And so there's actually a great, I guess it's not a podcast, but a reporting from NearCon of last year with some of the folks from Oracle and the CTO, Warren Jones of SailGP, talking about where these things are going. And so I think that the key is any of these partnerships and sponsorships that are enabling branding, they don't solve the, hey, what does this mean? Why does it matter? But at the end of the day, the why comes through the use cases. And so something like Near and SailGP actually starts to open up doors to other sports properties. It starts to look at other commercial opportunities. It starts to actually set legal precedent, especially with the DAO, for how DAOs can be used and frankly, SEC compliant. That's one of the most exciting pieces that I think David Palmer and team are working on.
Oh, sorry, Adam. Did you?
No, I'm just fascinated by this conversation. This is a good one,
Yeah.
guys. Right? I
No.
mean,
Yeah. No.
to me, it
Go
just
ahead,
about my
please.
quick thought, just the democratization of sports ownership, right? Like back in the day, like it was just like these like oligarchs that sit on these freaking thrones and everything. And now I'm participating in a jump ball league and pickle. I could buy into a pickleball league. I'm literally looking at the Austin Ranchers pickleball team after our recent trip to Austin. I'm like, wait a minute. I see what's happening here. I could get a small piece of the pie. I'm finding the game interesting, and you could have real ownership in it. I mean, this is changing everything.
I remember.
And look,
No, go ahead, please.
no, I was going to say, if you look around, the opportunities and the structures that can exist, imagine if like I was an owner of a pickleball team as part of a DAO and a true owner, not just a participant with like a PFP. But if I have a voting stake in
Couple
that,
bucks in it.
and you know what?
Skin in the game.
I ran out of being, I'm not interested in pickleball anymore because maybe I hurt my knee and it actually pains me and makes me
Scarred
upset
by
that
a
I can't play
pickleball
anymore. Yeah,
altercation, right?
yeah, I might be out. I'm done. I'm not doing it. But
F
what if
this
I can
game.
sell that to you and recoup some of my
Mhm.
investment in my hobby? That becomes fascinating because my investment isn't useless. My time investment isn't useless.
Yep.
My dollars investment isn't useless. And so when I think about the power of ownership and the immutability of ownership, and your stake is actually a phenomenal concept.
That's and ownership, right? Like let's keep it real. I'm a content creator. I'm a recruiter. I have products. You have products. We know that most people, unless they're putting some money into it or they have some type of ownership involved, they oftentimes don't see the value of it or they don't pursue it or they don't put time and effort into it. So I love that we're turning this on the head and I'll say the whole time. So I got to speak with David Palmer and the team, well, some of the team over there at ETH Denver. And the whole time he's explaining this and how they set up the DAO, I just had goosebumps because of just this. I've been a huge sports fan all my life, and the ability to kind of microtize that, and then for like intramural teams, like just kind of amazing for just your everyday kind of sports Joe or whatever. But the sale, sports, entertainment, automotive. One of the areas, you mentioned one of the hobbies, being a hobbyist, is automotive. When I don't remember exactly, but when we were at ETH Denver, you were showing me this really cool app. We'll
Yep.
get there. We'll get there. But I know that it's your belief that the automotive industry is going to play a big part in Web3 and the onboarding to that. Why do you believe it's at the forefront of this wave of innovation?
Well, first, I think you read in my bio that the first thing that I touched into truly entrepreneurially back in 2005 was an automotive e-commerce shop, right? E-commerce back then was still in its infancy and starting to come up with people like Amazon. And honestly, when I come back to where do car clubs and ownership and participation in communities happen, Where do you get into something that's so complex that you can actually break down into components and leverage things like NFTs? And then you also go, where are people spending their time? If you look at gaming, one of the biggest like time spenders is automotive games, whether that's race car games or I think of Animoca Brands and one of their Burnout games that they have. I'm a genuine believer that OEM manufacturers, just like an Amazon coming in, are going to see that the ability for them to create community and not just, hey, I own your data community, but true community around specialty vehicles. So I think of Ford and their SVT lines, whether it's a Raptor, a Lightning, or my own Mach-E community. You start to look and go, the behaviors that we think about and talk about with DAOs already exist. And then again, it's meeting people where they are. And so part of why I actually left the Near Foundation at the end of the year was to go chase an idea that I've been thinking about for the last 3.5, 4 years. And actually, you're already starting to see some of the true mass, like where can this help me in my daily life happen? On Tezos right now, there's a team called Oxhead Alpha that's building and working with the California State DMV.
Oh, yes,
you
I
think
heard
about
that.
NFTs, NFTs as titles. Well, actually, if I want to sell you my car right now and we meet in a parking lot at a meetup, I could sell it to you and call it 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
When I transfer right then and there, theoretically, that could be hitting the state DMV. Things could be
They
processing.
could
Guess
tax
what?
it.
California gets a little bit more tax dollars in real time because they know you just sold it and transferred it.
Do
right.
you think, and I'm bringing this up, and I'm interjecting for a second here because this is an interesting use case, right? They're going to start dropping
Super.
now that they know your wallet, right? Like my wallet's tied to my car, tied to my title. They're going to start dropping like reverse NFTs on me for traffic cam violations, speeding cam. Are we going down a slippery slope here? Where now it's tied to some kind of wallet, right? It's tied to some kind of wallet, and they can auto deduct your fucking ticket.
Yeah, right next to your
Well, can they auto
CBDCs.
deduct it though? Can they auto deduct it if you have not approved that transaction? There's the beauty.
Correct.
Good
So
point.
if you think about the ability for something like a ledger to be your key and anybody to be able to interact, sure,
Yeah.
maybe from day one,
Not your car
if
keys,
the
not your car.
titles and NFTs are minted.
Not your car keys,
Correct.
not your car.
And honestly, one of the coolest parts is my Mach-E right now. My phone is my key. So guess what? It's no different than carrying a wallet for my money. It's no different than me holding my art in my pocket. And so I think about that stuff a lot and go, again, where are people actually spending their time? Where are people going to be able to engage? And when you think about talking about keys, what better place than talking about a car? You just nailed it in what you said.
I mean, Carvana, same thing, right? Like it just makes transactions. I mean, any transaction just so much easier. I mean, think about mortgage. My wife's a commercial real estate attorney. She's like, do you know that banks actually have to keep paper records of all the titles? So if a bank burns down, like I'm like, so your mortgage is gone, your wife, like, so why don't we just start firebombing banks? Sorry, I did not say that on the air. That's not advice.
Nothing you say is financial.
Producers, if we could cut out the last 30 seconds of the show, that would be awesome.
I'm not talking about firebombing banks to wipe out his mortgage.
Bad ideas.
Bad idea. This is a comedic satire.
But think about actually Hurricane Sandy here in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
Lower Manhattan got flooded. The number of garages that got flooded where security certificates were sitting in vaults.
Oh, God.
Flooded.
Ooh.
Think about the nightmare that causes. And so think about what if all those records and stock certificates were on chain? What if my mortgage was protected? What if? And so you start to go again, where are the masses going? They're not going to be, you buy a mortgage, you might not have a ton of transactions, but you're going to see a ton of assets coming on chain. Houses don't move every week, but at the end of the day, think about the logistics behind the scenes. That's where this matters a ton.
It feels like this should already be adopted. Like it feels like how do we not have this already?
Have the technology.
Chris, I know you're not the Oracle of Omaha. I know you're not the genie. I know you're not Robin Williams, but
more of a Shazam kind of guy.
What do we need? How the hell do we make this make sense? How is it just a time thing? Is it a development thing? Is it, hey, we just heard Microsoft and Deloitte and I forget who coming up with their new blockchain? Is it that we need bigger players to get involved and for governments to feel like, I know it's meeting people where they're at, but this feels like one of those things. Like, why isn't the state of Washington, my state, paying attention? And why aren't they talking to like, what is it? Just what are we missing? What is
we need real use cases that have proven stories. And so when you think about where SailGP is, it's might not be the sexiest sport to most people. True. I like to believe it's F1 on the water, but and these things I'll tell you real quick, they do like 70 miles an hour plus. We saw them hit 99 kilometers an hour in Saint Tropez, like insane. But when you actually think about the precedent that's being set now, we need real case studies that prove how this works.
Yeah.
We need compliant case studies. That doesn't mean that the DGen stuff won't still happen, but when we have the compliant case studies, government officials are going to understand this better. When they see bigger companies like an Amazon coming in, they see the Microsofts coming in and launching. The big questions are, if things go to the traditional kind of Fortune 50, Fortune 500 route for onboarding, are we actually going to see insane monopolies? And if we're talking non-custodial and versus custodial stuff, I think we're at this pivot point where people are going to start using it and not know that they're using it, which is the best way to do this. But also what we need is more applications, right? People call dApps versus apps. Like, I love decentralized application as an idea, but we don't need to teach people what an app is. We just need them to use it, and then we can teach them the benefits later. So,
all right, you took it there, Chris. So I have to ask you, what are your thoughts on Solana Saga phone and the fact that that could be an ability to onboard? Now developers have a place to put their apps. They have a place to develop. And what do you think about it?
honestly, I think it's a great step forward. And I think about even the nearest of the world, right? Refocusing on the blockchain operating system. If you go to what Solana's doing, they're creating infrastructure.
Yeah.
They're trying to normalize it. They're trying to meet people where they are. People already have phones. They're saying use the phone, use the app. Now, the question becomes interoperability, lock-in, all that stuff. Is the phone good quality? Does the screen crack easy? Can I get a replacement fast? What happens to my keys? But when you think about where they're meeting people where they already are. And they're putting the phone in their hand, almost no different than Apple, right? It's, hey, you have the device. I'll admit right now, I'm locked into the Apple suite. I could try to switch. I used a Microsoft computer not too long ago and was so confused.
All the control buttons are different. It's weird.
But I also had the realization that not much has changed in a long time, which wasn't a bad thing. But I was quite confused when you think about innovation. But I think right now the phone is actually a really great precursor for where things can go.
Yeah.
Whether or not the troubles that the Solana team has with the network and others, debatable on will they be the place where these things happen.
Yeah.
But at a minimum, they're leading the conversation in a number of ways, and they're leading by putting physical goods in people's hands. And I think that's one of the hard things, right? Being able to wrap your head around this technology oftentimes means touching it.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason, actually, going back to automotive, why I think where people will actually touch these things, right? My phone is my key already. I don't need the Solana phone to have my key in my phone for my car. And so if we've got now a phone that's fully integrated into Web3 tech, and let's be honest, Samsung has been leading a lot of the innovation for a long time. So I'll kick them some credit too. While it's on phone, it's one of those natural behaviors. So
for sure,
can we get a phone that's actually a hardware device? Personally, I wonder when Ledger is going to do something like that.
I thought the Ledger Stacks was going to be that, but I don't know. Not there. Yeah, so I feel like the title for this is going to be "Meet People Where They're At," and then anyway. But I digress. Well, in terms of what's kind of current and what's percolating under the surface, are there any current or any emerging trends, any technology that you're particularly excited about? Is there anything, because I know you get to talk with people that are at the forefront of this, just anything you're hearing that you're excited about coming out soon or recently?
I think the biggest thing I'm excited about is honestly the shift from NFTs is purely collectible into utility-focused NFTs. One of them actually being Baron Davis's Slick Images.
BD.
I'm a big fan of Baron and the work he's doing. I'm super biased in that. I've worked pretty closely with him, and when I start to think about where he's going, the idea of stock photography and photography in general, like again, hardware devices, cameras, any camera, my Nikon D780 theoretically could be a device that's instantly minting. Right? You can do over Wi-Fi stuff. So when I think about protection of my IP, knowing the geolocation it was shot, knowing the time it was shot, knowing if someone tried to rip that off, or let's go to the crazy route with Mid-Journey, everything AI.
Oh gosh.
Well, if AI is sampling my image, shouldn't I be getting some type of credit and or payback for that? And so when I think about where things are going, I think about the ad networks like the Trade Desk, ensuring that someone actually owns the rights to the images. I think about those waterfalls that matter most for creators. And I think about people like photographers. And I think where Baron's head is at is starting with images, and then you venture out into video and other areas. But I think he's onto something big there. And when you think about the benefits of that, and again, full disclosure, it's being built on top of Mint-Base's infrastructure. it gets me excited because you're starting to see these utilities built. And that means you can start to have those conversations with the display networks for advertising and start to think about, again, consumer protections, but also creator protections. Creators over the course of history, you think about the cost of licensing images. These folks aren't making millions of dollars off of this. Getty is making a ton of money.
Right. The
Shutterstock is
cuts
making
are
a ton of money. But
minimal.
and I'm a big believer that smart contracts aren't going to change bad contracts. So let's be upfront about that.
That's a good point. Smart
A bad
contracts aren't going to change a bad deal, right? Like it's just
yeah.
communicated and stored and transferred differently. It's still the same terms. Until
One
you
and
change in the terms, it's still a bad deal.
Well, now imagine if you could actually license your image by impression volume as opposed to just a one-time buyout. What if
Oh,
you could protect it being used on display networks versus social
Hmm.
media versus these other places? I think back to when I worked on KEDS, there was a time when Taylor Swift wasn't actually getting paid out her royalties or her payments until certain terms and certain triggers, and there was back-end houses of Hollywood holding this money, of course, parking it in banks, probably in CDs, making some money off of it. And you think, okay, well, what's DeFi good for? Well, actually, what if we could actually certify that Taylor or someone like that actually met for contractual obligations, and you could actually unlock that stuff in real time with a multi-sig? I think over time, you're going to see lawyers playing a really big role in this. And I think, when you think about finance departments and the benefits of being able to have these smart contracts already in place, if the contract's bad, the contract's bad. But what if we can actually speed up the delivery of financial outcomes for these creators, whether you're
that
a big
matters
Taylor
so
Swift or
much.
you're
Yep.
the newest local artist?
Yep.
Because for that local artist to get that extra $100 in
Oh,
real
yeah.
time could
Microtransactions.
actually make them go and play another show.
Yeah.
And that could be the thing that boosts their career. That's a big deal when you think about community and you think about how Spotify has impacted local artists and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I'm a big believer that these things are actually going to unlock talent, but also unlock the financial outcomes for people.
Right there with you. And you mentioned it. Yeah. Spotify, what Starbucks is doing. Again, just meeting people where they're at with their audience, and not trying to push something into their face. So since that's the theme of this, might as well kind of wrap up on this theme as well. As when we first met Chris, and I remember talking to Adam about this, I was like, man, this dude just a wealth of information. Like I felt like every time we talk about one subject matter, we dive deep, and you knew about this, you knew about this, and you knew this guy. It was amazing. And I think one of the biggest things we could take away for our audience is that wealth of knowledge. So as somebody who is always pushing the boundaries, is in the room where the sausage is being made, as Adam might say, how do you stay ahead of the curve in this
do say that.
fast paced, ever changing industry? You just talked about something happening with Baron Davis and Mintbase. I'd never heard of anything about that. So, and I'm tapped in. How do you advise people that are curious from our conversation here, how to tap in, how to stay involved? And
I think the biggest piece is most people will stay always on and just be on 24/7. I actually think that becomes a detriment at some point. So I think it's really being focused about how and where you're consuming information. Obviously, you've got the CoinDesk and Decrypts of the world, the Defiance, but I think right now it's also look at mainstream media, but also set time to do education and research. I've got an almost 2-year-old, and I think about when he goes to school. How is he learning? It's not everything thrown at him at once. So I think meeting people where they are also becomes one of these things of going, hey, you've got to stay educated, you've got to stay reading, you've got to stay listening, but also don't overwhelm yourself. Find those passion areas that you're most interested in. And right, for me, for cars, look at what Hot Wheels is doing with Dapper Labs. It's a good start, right? It plays off
Mhm.
of NBA Top Shot. My little guy at some point could be interacting with crypto and NFTs and not even know it. And so when I think about this, it's really, at the end of the day, find the things that you're most passionate about, look at how the technology is interacting with that world, and then stay up to date with what's happening. Look at the teams that are involved. Find a couple key opinion leaders. One of my favorite is Lindsay McInerney, who's working on a project called Armored Kingdom. She's former head of innovation at AB InBev. And so you go, people from really great traditional careers have moved into this industry full time. Former athletes like a Baron, they're really diving in and they're seeing what the potentials are. And so find those key opinion leaders that you see diving in, interact with them in social, interact with them on Twitter. And I think honestly, just be curious. I think that's the biggest thing. You got to be
I love that.
curious, whether it's in traditional finance or it's in crypto and blockchain and Web3 or even Web2. Like there's plenty of good apps out there that can evolve your life. And so I think really taking that, what do I need in my life? how can this technology help me, and go down that rabbit hole.
You know, we in our intro, it ends with stay curious, my friends. Curiosity is always the way. You know, I'd like to talk to you more, but that was such an awesome ending right there, an answer to a question that I think is a great place to end here. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining
Thanks,
us today. You are awesome, amazing, have a wealth of information. Please let our audience and the people know where to find you on socials. And if you're working on anything, let them know.
Oh, I will. We've got a product that should be launching coming out of stealth. We're aiming for July. But stay up to date with me on Twitter at Chris Ghent, Ghent. Spelt like Ghent, but the family came to the US and mispronounced it, so I've been stuck with it forever. But follow me on Twitter, just at Chris Ghent, and ask questions. If you've got questions, DM me, ask in public. Happy to answer and happy to share any info.
I love that. That's awesome. And to everyone listening at home, if you enjoyed what you heard today, tell a friend, tell them about us. Take 15 seconds, leave a comment. We'll comment back. I greatly appreciate you for joining us on Immutable Mindset. Please follow us on all our social media channels at Immutable Show. Subscribe, comment, and network. Thank you for joining us. Catch us next week. Take care, y'all.